I'm Rich Andreski, Bureau Chief for Public Transportation at the Connecticut Department of Transportation. And I'd like to welcome you to Along the Lines, a podcast series where we'll explore current issues and ideas on Connecticut's public transportation system. Hello, this is Rich Andreski from Along the Lines, a podcast about public transportation in Connecticut. And today we're back to talk about safety. At the Connecticut Department of Transportation, it's our number one priority. It really is at the core of everything we do, from the safety of our customers to the safety of our employees and the public at large. But this year, COVID-19 challenged us to bring safety to an entirely new level. Everyone on our transit team has risen to the occasion of enacting all the important safety protocols to protect essential workers who depend on bus and train services. And we continue with these mandatory protocols as our state begins to reopen and our customers return to our services. But today, we're going to focus on a specific type of safety as we celebrate Rail Safety Week. Joining me today are Robert Hanson, detective from the Criminal Investigation Unit of the Amtrak Police Department, and Kevin Burns, Operation Lifesaver Coordinator from the Connecticut Department of Transportation. Kevin and I are recording from the CT Rides headquarters in Rocky Hill, Connecticut, and Detective Hanson is joining us remotely. Gentlemen, welcome. So let's get to it. Rob, why don't you introduce yourself and tell our listeners what you do in the role as detective for the Amtrak Police Department?
Well, good afternoon, Rich. First, I want to thank Connecticut DOT for putting this together. Obviously, here at the Amtrak Police Department, safety is our number one priority, not just for passengers and employees that are traveling on the service, but for the communities that we travel through. So for the last 10 years, I've worked for the Amtrak Police Department, 6 of which I've been a detective within the New England Division. I cover all the criminal investigations across the state of Connecticut, Western Massachusetts, Vermont, and New Hampshire. One of the main responsibilities that we have is both working with communities that we serve and we travel through, partnering with some of our other state-supported partners, such as Connecticut DOT and Mass DOT, to increase safety along the right-of-way, and then responding to critical incidents such as a trespasser strike or a grade crossing collision. So that's some of the things that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about some of the ways to be safe around railroad tracks, keep your community safer, and how to prevent these incidents from happening moving forward. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today and look forward to the conversation.
Hey, Rob, thanks so much. I know how busy you are, and I do appreciate you making the time to be with us today. Kevin, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name is Kevin Burns. I work for the Department of Transportation, and I oversee the Operation Lifesaver program, which is the national rail safety program. It's in all states. So I coordinate all the efforts in Connecticut. It is the goal of Operation Lifesaver is to reduce train collisions with cars and pedestrians, to prevent that along the tracks and crossings in the railroad right away.
Kevin, thank you also for being with us. And I know you come from a law enforcement background as well, and we're glad to have you at the Connecticut DOT. So thank you for being here. Why don't we start off with a sort of a question about Rail Safety Week. Maybe we could talk a little bit about why do we do it? Why do we have a Rail Safety Week? And Kevin, I'll start with you. Could you give the listeners a little bit of an overview about Rail Safety Week?
Well, Rail Safety Week started 4 years ago. This is our 4th year we're having it. We started in 2017. So it highlights all our efforts that we do throughout the year. We do have some special events that highlights it, such as Operation Clear Track, where we do coordinate with Amtrak. Amtrak sponsors that. So they go off and they do outreach at all the crossings with local police departments. And we do this just to highlight all of our efforts throughout the year.
Thank you. And I'm wondering, though, you both have served in a law enforcement capacity for a very long time and probably seen some things that others may not be aware of. Can you talk a little bit, either of you, maybe Detective, you could start us out. Why do we need to focus on rail safety in particular?
So I think one of the things that we see at the Amtrak Police Department as a common issue is a lot of people don't understand how often these incidents occur. And I think that's really what Rail Safety Week is all about. It's trying to bring light to it because a lot of times people will hear on the 6 o'clock news, and then the following morning that somebody was struck by a train. And then it very quickly becomes old news and they move on to something else. So it doesn't really stay in the spotlight for too long, which is both good and bad. On the good side, for the family that's grieving the loss of a loved one or somebody that was injured, it doesn't victimize them any more than being involved in the incident. But on the other side of it, it doesn't necessarily highlight the dangers around railroad crossings. And then we continue to see incidents occur. So, one of the real focuses on Rail Safety Week is to try to push that message out on a broad spectrum, let people know that these incidents are happening. Mostly all of them are preventable. And the way to prevent them is by being more aware and more cognizant around railroad crossings. So like Kevin said before, Operation Lifesaver and Amtrak partner very closely every day, especially during Rail Safety Week, to bring some of these activities to the forefront. And we try to push out as broad of a message as possible, both across North America, the US and Canada, with our partners up there as well.
Rob, couldn't agree more, and we're so grateful for the partnership we have with Amtrak. Maybe you could tell us a little more. What should an individual do if they come to a grade crossing and let's say they see a gate malfunction, or let's say their vehicle breaks down on the crossing? What should these individuals be doing to keep themselves safe?
So, Rich, that's a perfect starting point. When you pull up to a grade crossing, one of the things that a lot of people don't notice is a blue sign with white letters on the front. Contains 6 digits. It's a DOT crossing number. That's the emergency notification system sign. So there's actually a video online that we show in normal presentations, and we push it out to as much of an audience as possible. And it really walks you through the steps that you should take if you approach a grade crossing and you see the gates are malfunctioning, or if you see a vehicle stuck on the track, or if your vehicle becomes stuck on the track. But the number one thing we want to stress is we want people to get out of their vehicle. Far too many times we see people that stay in their vehicle, they go forward and backwards to try to get around the gates. If their vehicle becomes disabled on the crossing as a train is barreling down, or they don't see a train coming. And then in the 30 to 45 seconds that they spend trying to move their vehicle off the grade crossing, then a train is coming at a higher rate of speed. So the first thing we want people to do is get out of their vehicle. We want them then to come outside of the crossing area. And if there is a train coming right away, run at a 45-degree angle in the direction that the train is coming from, away from the train. Because obviously, if your vehicle is going to get struck, that's something that will normally get replaced by insurance. But the person who's occupying that vehicle will not. So we want those people to be far away, because as soon as that collision occurs, that vehicle will become a projectile. So we want people to be away from the train, but not where they would be struck by the vehicle if it does get struck after the train makes contact with it. And then there's a blue emergency notification sign. We always stress people, especially first responders who work in certain areas. On the Hartford line, we have a large number of grade crossings, well over 30. So it's very challenging to spread a broad safety message on that line without our partners. So we stress the local first responders to understand those emergency notification numbers, have dispatch centers have the DOT crossing numbers there as well, so they understand the policies and procedures to get the train stopped immediately. From the time that somebody calls a blue ENS notification number and makes notification to the train dispatcher, in all likelihood, that train can be stopped within seconds. And that's really what we want to try to stress, is that those seconds are usually always spared when people get out of their vehicle, call the blue notification number, make notification to the railroad who operates that line, and then they stop train traffic until somebody can get out there. And that's really what saves lives.
It's straightforward, but I can only imagine the sheer terror that sets in seeing the headlights of a train coming, barreling down on you. And certainly panic must overtake many people. And I think the key here is, if I could, just to say that we need to reach as many people as possible, and make sure that they understand the gravity of the situation and the best way out of a very difficult situation. So, Kevin, maybe you could talk a little bit of how we're reaching people. I mean, if you're a motorist, there's a good chance that you're going to be coming across a railroad grade crossing at some point in your travels. They're everywhere. So how are we reaching the public? What are some of the things that we're doing to get the message out?
Usually we do Operation Clear Track. And Rob, I'm not sure if Amtrak does participate with this. So we've gone out to crossings and we've handed out safety cards. And these are Amtrak safety cards, and they are fantastic safety cards. They have both what to do as a pedestrian and as a driver, not walk on the train tracks if you're a pedestrian, or how to navigate a crossing when you're there. This year, we have done our outreach through schools. We sent out over 500 emails to principals with our links for our videos. Hopefully, a lot of those videos, one of them was the video that Rob was referring to, was called Critical Junction. We sent that out hopefully to give to high schoolers. That's an excellent video, and hopefully that was shown to some of the students out there.
Thank you, Kevin. We really can never become lax in reaching out to the public. Requires constant vigilance. It's a role that you play for the Connecticut Department of Transportation. It's so critical. I know how much more difficult it is to do outreach with COVID-19, but I'm glad we're keeping the focus. And the podcast, I would just note, this podcast was something you suggested. I think it's a great idea, and I wanted to thank you for pulling us together with Detective Hanson. So thank you. Maybe if I could, pivot to statistics, because I think statistics tell a compelling story. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the numbers, and I'll start. And although we're talking about the risks associated with grade crossings, rail travel in general is one of the safest ways to travel. There's a great article by Todd Littman from the Victoria Transport Policy Institute. It's called Revisiting the Transit Safety Narrative. And what he says in so many words is that rail travel is 20 times safer than travel by car. So we think nothing of getting in our cars at the beginning of a day and jumping behind the wheel. And in fact, if you're riding on a train, you're 20 times safer. And anything that's 10 times safer or more, that's an order of magnitude safer. So we're talking about a very substantial safety track record on trains. But that doesn't mean that accidents don't happen. And so let's talk a little bit about the numbers around safety accidents and the issues with train safety and trains stopping at crossings. So, Rob, you work for the Amtrak Police Department, and you probably have a few things to say about trains and the unique situation that trains present. Could you talk a little bit about stopping distances and sight lines and why grade crossing safety can be a challenge?
Yeah, so I think that it's obviously it's a very important aspect, and with COVID-19, it's really changed kind of how we push out the safety message. But like you said, the statistics are somewhat sobering. But right now, about every 3 hours in this country, a person or a vehicle is struck by a train. And I think it's important to note that it's not in a normal, we call them trespasser strikes or grade crossing accidents. There's usually no injuries to anybody that's on the train. The train is a very large piece of machinery, which is a very safe piece of machinery. And traditionally, there's no injuries, and sometimes they don't even know what occurred to passengers until the conductor tells them after the fact about a delay for a certain reason to what happens on the train. So I think it's important to stress that 99.99% of the time, the travelers are somewhat inconvenienced, but otherwise unaffected. But I think it's important to understand that as a train's coming down to a grade crossing, especially on the Hartford line, now that we've increased speeds to 100 miles an hour plus, and on the shoreline going at speeds greater than 150 miles an hour, it's important to realize that these trains do not stop on a dime. So when an engineer is operating a train, say on the Hartford line southbound, if he sees a vehicle that's stuck in the middle of a grade crossing or he sees a trespasser in the middle of the tracks, his only option is to utilize his horn and his bell and slow that train down. But a train traveling at 55 miles an hour usually takes over a mile to come to a stop. And we're talking that our trains are operating at speeds double that. So in many cases, we're seeing these trains come to a stop between 1 to 2 miles after a grade crossing incident or after a trespasser strike, just because of the speeds, especially on the Hartford line. And we deal with it a lot in Massachusetts and Vermont as well. With that service, is the scenery is gorgeous. So you have a lot of rural mountains. You're coming through a lot of tight areas where the engineer's visibility is even less. So when I say if they're coming down the Hartford line on a straightaway and they see something ahead of them, that might cause them to slow their train down a little bit in advance, which might reduce that stopping distance just a little bit. But in some of these areas, especially northern Connecticut, where you're coming through a lot of rural areas and you're following the Connecticut River, you just don't have that visibility because you're following right around the curves as you're coming down. So it's just an important thing to remember that these incidents, like I said, are preventable by people taking the appropriate actions ahead of time and by people just staying off the tracks.
A pretty straightforward lesson, and we need to continue to get that message out there to the public. For some reason, and this is something, I'll tell a little personal story here. Every year, our family does holiday cards. We'll go to Snapfish or Shutterfly, and we'll go to take a look at the options available. And every year, I come across backgrounds or samples on the website that show families standing on railroad tracks. And there's something, I guess, romantic. People in their imagination look at railroad tracks, and there's this idea of romanticism and just something visually striking about train tracks. But it's always amazing to me to see examples of that in public where, as a matter of fact, I've seen musicians do the same thing, where they'll go ahead and do an album cover on a railroad, and I'm always shocked by that and disappointed and dismayed, frankly, because seeing popular figures or seeing websites with those kind of images gives people the impression that it's okay to walk about the railroad. And you mentioned it, Detective, safety, and we consider people walking on the tracks to be trespassers. And it's important. It's not just about safety. It's about trespass. And when you're on or about a railroad and you're not authorized to be there, that is trespassing. So I'm going to turn to you, Kevin, for a little discussion about the safety statistics that we have here in Connecticut in Operation Lifesaver. You joined the DOT a while back. I know you were here with us when we opened the Hartford line. And the Hartford line has been a phenomenal success. One of the things that we did with the Hartford line was we increased operating speeds with Amtrak. So the Amtrak Railroad got faster. Trains out there now operate at 110 miles an hour. Can you talk a little bit about what you've observed over the last few years of Hartford line and how that's been going? And I think recently we encountered our first trespasser fatality. So if you could talk a little bit about what's been going on out there on the Hartford line.
A lot of people don't realize how quiet trains could be. Even the regular diesel locomotives, they are very quiet compared to the old locomotives. They think, oh, I'll hear a train coming. You won't hear a train coming. The only time a train blows its horn is when it's near a crossing. So if you're out where there's no crossing nearby, you're not going to hear a train, and it's going to sneak up on you. On the main line, those trains are electric. They're even more quiet. And what happens is sometimes people think, oh, let's just cross the tracks, I'll hear it coming. And then the train comes, and then they freeze out there, and then they're struck by the train. But our statistics in Connecticut relatively are on. We have a very safe system here. We do things. We put up fencing where there's areas where we do have trespassing incidents. We do things like that, and we keep our system pretty safe. So our rates are usually we're like about 35 out of the 50 states in our rankings for pedestrian strikes.
Thank you for that, Kevin. Yeah, the statistics do tell the story, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished here. Vigilance is really the name of the game in safety. That's true not just about for the general public, but it's true for our frontline workforce in terms of every day you go out there on the railroad, you have to stay vigilant. And I think we have a great relationship with Amtrak, with Metro North Railroad, and with Transit America that operates the Hartford line. And I'll tell you, at least my observation from where I sit at the Connecticut DOT, I see safety taken very seriously, and that's something that we will continue to do. I'm going to pivot now once more, and we'll talk a little bit about the human toll of rail safety, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. The fatality on the railroad is terrible, regardless of the circumstances, whether it could have been avoided or not, whether it was someone who unfortunately was taking their life. But there's a human toll to this too, in terms of the train crews and police departments that have to respond to these incidents. So could we talk a little bit about this is a very personal thing, so please only share what you're comfortable sharing. But Detective, could you talk a little bit about the impact that these incidents have on train crews and perhaps you or your colleagues when you have to respond to an incident?
Sure. So I think that's, I'm glad you brought it up, because one of the, I hate to say, most forgotten about impacted persons in any kind of grade crossing or trespasser incident, is the engineer. Many of these engineers have been operating trains for time and time over and have been around for quite a long time. And they've been involved in either one, none, or several incidents, depending on what lines they operated on and when. And each engineer is different. How they handle things are different. We've had engineers that are involved in one incident and they never return again to that capacity because they're so affected by the lack of ability for them to control the situation, I think is one way to describe it. I think if you're operating a vehicle, you have an opportunity to swerve left and swerve right and hit the brakes and you see something coming and you have some evasive actions you can take. But one of the things the engineers can't do is take any evasive action. They can slow the train down, they can try to stop the train, but they know at that point, once they put the train into emergency, that their options are pretty much ended at that point in terms of preventing that accident. So it's only really about the person who's the trespasser or the person that's operating the vehicle to make a decision, which is why the safety aspect is so important. So I think that the engineers are definitely a victim every time we have one of these incidents. They're one of the first people that we talk to make sure that they're okay. And many times we'll have them reach out to us days later and just ask for services or ask for some kind of help, and we'll provide them with any services that we can. But a lot of times, especially right after an incident, most of these people are family members, and they understand that there's a family on the other side of it that might be grieving the loss of a loved one. That's very challenging for many of them to take in. You mentioned on our colleagues, and I think it's the same with the police department response. In my career, I've responded to 79 fatal accidents in the 10 years that I've been with the Amtrak police, and well over 100 non-fatal accidents. So as I say, we did a video a couple of years ago for Operation Lifesaver and the Stop Track Tragedies campaign. And it was a great production that was put together because it took a story from me along with a fatality we had in Vermont and kind of put the whole package together. So you were hearing my side of the same fatality, you heard the family side. And it was a good package that kind of put everything together. But I think it's the same impact on us. Many law enforcement officers, have kids at home, including myself. So when you get called in at 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night for a trespasser strike, in some cases you get desensitized because you know what you're going to, but it's going to be a very challenging evening for a lot of people. And I think that's the most important takeaway, is that outside of the investigation and putting everything together, while you're working a scene, that there's a family that you're about to go notify that their loved one was killed by a train. And that's really what we want to take home. And we teach it in all of our classes, especially in high school kids, middle school classes. We do a lot of driver's ed classes as well. And we try to explain that there are family members out there that care about you. And at the end of the day, those people are the ones that are going to be receiving the news that no family member should ever have to receive before. And that's a challenging part for anybody that's involved. So I appreciate you bringing that up because it's something that kind of gets forgotten about, I think, in the grand scheme of things. But it helps to really broaden the safety message to understand that these incidents, again, are preventable, and it's a challenging situation for everybody involved.
Detective, thank you for sharing that. Really terrible to hear that you've personally had to respond to 79 of these incidents. That's an incredible toll. I just want to say thank you. We are fortunate to have the Amtrak Police Department and other partners, law enforcement partners there to respond. It is something, though, that is avoidable, as we've been talking about. And we need to continue to find ways to reach people. And so, Kevin, I'm going to come back to this idea of sort of cutting through the static. We live in an age where we're bombarded with social media, advertising, news feeds. We really are inundated with information. So what do you think are some of the ways we can break through that static? What are some of the things that you've seen that have been effective at reaching people?
Well, our direct outreach to principals and the school districts, that has worked pretty well. Especially I'll give you an example, our outreach efforts in Enfield. We had 6 teachers that we trained up there to be our volunteers for us. And, now that they're doing virtual learning a lot of places, they're actually doing virtual lessons over for their students in Enfield. We've had outreach to other school districts where I just send them the videos, and they've taken those videos and they've shown them as part of their virtual learning.
that's certainly something that requires an extra effort, in part because school-age kids don't always have the level of awareness that adults may have and may be more prone to taking risks. So definitely appreciate that. So, we're at the end of our half hour here, so I want to wrap up with a few closing thoughts. First, I want to say thank you. Thank you for offering to be here. Kevin, thank you for suggesting this podcast. Really excellent idea. The stories that both of you shared today are really compelling. It's not something that you can really imagine unless you've lived through it. So I'd like to offer you both the opportunity to offer a few closing words about safety, a few closing thoughts about if you had, let's say 30 seconds with somebody and wanted to leave them with the most important message in all of this, what would it be? So I'll start with you, Detective Hanson. Why don't you start us out?
So again, I want to appreciate the opportunity to have this forum today. I think it's very, very important. And I'll close just by saying, every day the officers from Amtrak Police and the officers from the other commuter railroads across the country do a really good job. I can only really speak to our experiences, but collaboratively, they identify hotspots. They mediate hotspots by going out there and educating the public. They stop at grade crossings and stop motor vehicle operators who stop on the tracks or may have an incident at the tracks and educate them. They go out into the schools and educate people as much as they possibly can, from preschool all the way up through high school. So it's important to realize that, while they're making all these efforts, that it's everybody else. Everybody needs to do their part to help make the railroads safer and the railroads across Connecticut safer. So we can go out, we identify all these places, we do as much education as we can, and we work very closely with Operation Lifesaver. But at some point, it's very important that the public does their part. So we want people to be out there. We want them to be aware. If you see a trespasser that's walking down the train tracks, you need to call that in. Call the Amtrak police at 800-331-0008 or call the local police department and make sure somebody responds out there. Because by seeing somebody walking down the train tracks, there is a high likelihood that there is a train coming and that person may get struck within seconds to minutes later. So you could be saving their life by calling them in. So it's important to understand as you're driving around, take a look for that emergency notification sign. Understand how to use it, how that system works. Because like I said, in my 10-year experience with the Amtrak Police Department, all of these incidents are preventable if everybody does their part. And this is a huge part of it. The more education we can get out, the better off everybody's going to be in the communities that we serve.
Detective, thank you for that. Words to live by, certainly. Kevin, over to you. A closing thought, and also where can individuals go for more information on train safety?
Well, please visit the national website, where it's also available on the Connecticut DOT website, but the national website, www.oli.org. They have all the videos there. You can download them. You can watch them. It has a wealth of information on railroad safety. It explains what the organization is all about. It is the National Rail Safety Program for the United States. People don't realize that how dangerous it is to walk on the rails. We want you to stay off, stay away, and stay alive. That's our basic message. Look, listen, and live. When you're at a crossing, don't stop on the train tracks. Obey the signals. Stay off the tracks. It's not only dangerous, it's illegal. And a lot of people don't realize that, and they walk on the train tracks thinking that they're going to be safe. They'll hear a train coming. You will not hear a train coming until it's too late.
So, Rich, I just wanted to mention, we had talked about several websites where you can gather information, and there's several videos that I mentioned in the conversation that we had. But one of the places you can find all these videos, and we encourage people to visit, not just the Operation Lifesaver side of things, because that's got a very broad national perspective, but some of the Amtrak police specific stories can be found at stayofthetracks.org. You'll find all the videos, including some of the ones that I mentioned, the emergency notification video, another video called Cheating Death, and some additional age-appropriate videos to help spread the safety message.
I'll close by saying, 5 words: please stay off the tracks. Do not go on the tracks, and ever under any circumstances. Pretty straightforward. Really great conversation today. Really important conversation. So I want to say thanks again, Detective Hanson, Rob Hanson from the Amtrak Police Department, and Kevin Burns from the Connecticut Department of Transportation. And with that, I'm Rich Andreski from Along the Lines. Thank you for being with us. Take care. Thanks for listening to this episode of Along the Lines. This is your host, Rich Andreski. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please remember to subscribe and share.